Hello, people. Uh, I sincerely hope that that high-pitched noise coming from one of my lovely neighbor's house, it just fucking stopped. I don't know what the fuck that is. Somebody's got a fucking dentist drill in their garage or something. That's what it sounds like. It's been going on for like, at least for some, for an hour, for a half hour, every day for like a week. I don't know what the fuck kind of project they got going. Anyways, I finished a book. Mark Twain, The Innocents Abroad. It's another book that just was sitting around my house. I can tell by the price that's on the first page here, written in pencil, that at some time or other I bought that at King Book. It's just been bouncing around the shelves for who knows how long. It's a very long book. It's 723 pages. I read it in like a week. I would say that this is light reading compared to what I normally read. It's the humorous story of an ocean voyage that they take on what would have been called a cruise liner in those days. This was 1867, and it's all people from the United States of America, and they sail into, they go by the Rock of Gibraltar, they go to Spain, they go to Italy, they go up to Paris, they go all the way into the Black Sea, they go to Constantinople, they come back, and they hit places in the Holy Land. In fact, there's a great big chapter on the Holy Land. I'll get to that later. They go to a couple places in Africa, Morocco. It's a pretty cool book. And of course, it's Mark Twain's funny style of writing. I read, at some point in my life, I read Life on the Mississippi, which is not meant to be as funny as this one. And sometime in the distant past, I read A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And I don't remember much about that Connecticut Yankee book, other than it's nothing like the movie. There's some grim stuff in that book. The movie, I think, has got like Bob Hope and Bing Crosby and some shit, and they're dancing and singing around, but the book is nothing like that. So, I get to my notes here. Twain doesn't have much nice to say about the Portuguese inhabitants of the Azore Islands. He calls them vermin at one point. I had no idea. If somebody, before I read this book, if somebody would ask me where the Azore Islands were, I would have been, 2,000 miles off. They're halfway between North America and Europe. And so at that time, boats probably stopped there for water, maybe coal, I don't know, fresh food, I don't know. If there was any turtles that were native to the Azore Islands, they probably took all of them and ate them, and now they're extinct. They go to Paris fairly early in the book, and this is around the time of the Great Exhibition, and they go to the Great Exhibition. It's kind of an interesting part of the book, because it's a time and a place that I've read about many, many times. This is only a few years before the Franco-Prussian War. Napoleon the Third is still lording it over France, and Napoleon the Third is like, he's at his zenith when they're having the Great Exhibition. And Mark Twain is in love with Napoleon the Third. He talks about him like he's Napoleon. Of course, Americans' eyes had a different view of Napoleon and France. And, the rest of Europe kind of hated him, and America kind of liked him. Every book on the Franco-Prussian War begins with the Great Exhibition, just to show what was going on at that time. And one of the odd things about the Great Exhibition is Krupp, the German steelmaker, and the German armament maker built this giant cannon for the Great Exhibition. And that was part of the Great Exhibition. Last paragraph, 154. I don't think I'm doing much reading here. There was one other one that I noted down way at the end of the book. Last paragraph, 154, 155. Oh, this is talking about, I can't remember the guy's name now. A German-sounding name, but he's a Frenchman. And he rebuilt Paris and rebuilt all the crooked streets and everything, and did it under Napoleon the Third. So he's talking about it here, and he says, "They will build no more barricades. They will break no more soldiers' heads with paving stones. Louis Napoleon has taken care of all that. He is annihilating the crooked streets and building in their stead noble boulevards as straight as an arrow, avenues which a cannonball could traverse from end to end without meeting an obstruction more irresistible than the flesh and bones of men, boulevards whose stately edifices will never afford refuges and plotting places for starving, discontented revolution breeders. 5 of these great thoroughfares radiate from one ample center, a center which is exceedingly well adapted to the accommodation of heavy artillery. The mobs used to riot there, but they must seek another rallying place in future, and this ingenious Napoleon paves the streets of his great cities with a smooth, compact composition of asphaltum and sand. No more barricades of flagstones, no more assaulting His Majesty's troops with cobbles. I cannot feel friendly toward any quondam fellow American, Napoleon the Third, especially at this time. I cannot feel friendly toward my quondam fellow American, Napoleon the Third, especially at this time, when in fancy I see his credulous victim, Maximilian, lying stark and stiff in Mexico, and his maniac widow watching eagerly from her French asylum for the form that will never come. But I do admire his nerve, his calm self-reliance, his shrewd good sense." That's just an example of how he goes on and on about Napoleon III. And I marked this paragraph because 3 years later is the Paris Commune. So no matter how they rebuilt Paris, the people, they learned how to riot just fine. Where are we at here? Oh, they climb Mount Vesuvius, one of the things that they do. And the only reason that I even marked that off, I'm on page 330 there. It's the only really thing, the only mention he makes of any kind of a natural, I don't know, I'm kind of funny. If I'm gonna vacation like that, I'm gonna go see a great forest or some kind of wild area. I'm not gonna go visit other cities. He goes into like a 10-page version of the Seven Sleepers story, which is just about, it's North Africa. It's kind of getting towards the Holy Land, and these kids go to sleep in a cave and they wake up 1,000 years later, to make a long story short. And I wrote down here, Twain has been trolling me regarding his religious beliefs. I had to Google to find his position, and it seems as if Mark Twain believed in a God, but not in any kind of organized religion, not in the Bible, and not in any of the miracles or anything like that. He, I should have wrote the guy's name down, but some other guy that, puts forward his philosophy, Twain identified with that, and that's what it was. He really had no use for miraculous stories, and I write down that Twain has been trolling me because Twain is in the Holy Land and he's writing about how wonderful all these places where these miracles happened, and really laying it on thick, and I had to Google it just to see what the fuck, is this guy trolling me or what? And yes, he was. And just a couple of modern day writers. Dave Barry, he used to write a column for the Detroit newspapers, but he wrote a book on Florida that my wife has down in the house, and I read it, and it was kind of funny. Dave Barry writes a lot like Mark Twain. I'm sure that he learned from Mark Twain. Also, there's a guy, Bill Bryson, that I've read several of Bill Bryson's books. They're very funny. Into the Woods was probably Bryson's most famous book about hiking the Appalachian Trail. He writes a lot like Mark Twain. And then I've got one last thing here, 721. It's almost at the very end of the book. Last paragraph, 721. And this kind of has to do with, after I read this, I said, wow, some things never change. I have no fault to find with the manner in which our excursion was conducted. Its program was faithfully carried out, a thing which surprised me, for great enterprises usually promise vastly more than they perform. It would be well if such an excursion could be gotten up every year and the system regularly inaugurated. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. Wise words there. That's it. I have another book that I expect that I will finish very quickly. Thank you.